So I'm doing something different. Now I'm sure you're saying, whoa, hold on. This isn't an overlong, over-emotional video that is clearly just a thinly veiled attempt by its creator to work out his own personal problems. And you're right, it's not. Unfortunately, due to the very involved nature of the videos that I create, it's a little difficult to get out more than one of them a month that is at the same quality. But if you don't upload at least bi-weekly, YouTube seems to just figure you're dead. So in an effort to both appease YouTube and give all of you some more of my frankly beautiful voice, I'm going to start a new series called StoryStreet Ramblings, because rambling is something that I am very good at. Basically, I'm going to take a topic that I want to talk about but can't really make a full main StoryStreet video out of, and just talk about it here in this more casual format, which I can make a lot quicker, but will hopefully be as entertaining. And I figured what better place to start than where my channel first took off back in 2019, Community. I love Community more than I love life itself. I watch it at least twice a year, usually by accident. I talked about it extensively on my video on the show, but I don't recommend you go watch that one because I don't think it's very good. But I owe that video a lot. It was the second video that I ever made to get over 100,000 views. It was what propelled me over 100 subscribers and then over 1,000 subscribers. If it weren't for that video, I would not be sitting here talking to you right now at all. So I figured, why not talk about Community again? But this time by ranking every episode of the show. Across Community's 6 seasons, there are 110 episodes, and I love all of them to an extent, but I definitely love some more than others. And some of you might be saying, Alex, didn't you already release your top 20 Community episodes on your Patreon for free like a year ago? And I would say, yeah, kind of, but opinions change, and even my number one pick has changed, so this is definitely going to be different. And I even have a few, dare I say, hot takes in here. Spicy take. I think some of these are just gonna make people mad at me, but you know, that's just what the internet is for. But regardless, I do feel the need to say that as with any other ranking video of any kind, this is just my opinion. The chances that our lists will be exactly the same are astronomically low. Such is the subjectivity of art. This is just my list. Feel free to share yours in the comments. Just don't expect me to care. Let's begin. Number 110, Advanced Introduction to Finality. Yeah, I bet you can imagine that a lot of these bottom ones are going to be season 4 episodes. Advanced Introduction to Finality was the season 4 finale, and it is the episode that proved that Community can indeed jump the shark. It just feels like bad Community fan fiction, right down to the "it's all a dream" ending. It's just trying to bring back as many things, as many references that Community fans will get. Paintball, the darkest timelines, the dice, all of that stuff. It's just trying to bring all that back in order to convince you that this is actually cool. This is actually really cool. It says that it's cool like 3 separate times.
Oh my god. This is so cool.
Out of the 4 season finales that could have been the show's series finale, this is the one that feels the least authentic. It's the one that feels the least like Community out of all of them. It's what I think is indicative of season 4's problems in general, in that it just didn't realize that the point of Community was never all the crazy antics. It was never all the parodies or the homages. It was the people. It was the characters. I like the attempt at having Jeff's character like go through kind of an arc here and trying to make him sort of afraid to leave Greendale. I like that idea, but I just don't think it quite works here because it gets trapped in all of these just frankly nonsensical ideas. It's definitely my least favorite episode, even if it has a couple good chuckles.
So I got to save the date for your graduation. Should I bring a date or try to hook up there?
109. Intro to Knots. This is definitely my least favorite Christmas episode because they had the audacity to tease that it could have been a Die Hard episode and they didn't do it. Also, I just don't really like the history teacher character. I don't even remember his name off the top of my head. He's just boring. Like, the actor they get to play him does as much as he can with the material he's given, but he's just not nearly as interesting as the biology teacher in season 3. I can't remember his name either, though. Or Betty White in season 2. Betty White in season 2 was in the show less than this history teacher was, and she was more interesting.
I'm going to use this to attack you, and You use respect to defend yourself.
The episode itself is enjoyable enough, but there's just not a lot here. And it's almost just kind of annoying to watch, honestly. Not to mention that it introduces this like late game plotline of like the valedictorian race. Why wasn't that there for the entire season? That could have created some really interesting dynamics between Annie and Shirley. Why are you introducing it in episode 10 of 12? Number 108. Intro to Felt Surrogacy. We're not out of the season 4 woods yet. Intro to Felt Surrogacy is just... it's just stupid. I wish we could have gotten a good puppet episode because I love puppets. I love puppetry as a medium. I think it's really fun and cool. I like how it's sort of coming back into mainstream use with like Grogu and Mandalorian and stuff. I love puppets. But like I said back in Advanced Introduction to Finality, the main problem I have with season 4 is that it's so obsessed with the crazy antics of Community and not the actual characters at the center of it. And that's pretty much the main problem that I have with Intro to Felt Surrogacy. I love the songs. The songs are fun and I think they're really cool and really catchy. And I even kind of like the idea of everybody having a secret and like revealing that secret at the end of the episode. It's just some of those secrets are more interesting than others, like Jeff leaving a kid behind at a baseball game and becoming like his dad, or Shirley leaving her kids in a grocery store all night. Like, those are interesting. Troy burning a field is not, kind of just indicative of how season 4 really didn't know how to handle Troy. I don't even think it's like that bad of an episode. I think it's just so low on the list because it's the one I wish was so much better. I really wish we could have gotten a good Community puppet episode, but unfortunately we did not.
How did you know we're from Greendale?
From Pierce's shirt.
How did you know my name is Pierce?
It's embroidered on your Greendale shirt you got at the student store.
How'd you know I got it at the student store?
I'm a touch psychic.
107. It's harder to do that than it looks. Conventions of space and time. I don't even remember most of what happened in this episode. Another one of season 4's sins is that it really didn't have any clue what to do with the Troy-Britta relationship. I think the Troy-Britta relationship could have been so interesting, but season 4 just didn't know what to do with it, so it barely even touches it, except for in episodes like this, and even then, it's done kind of poorly. Like, it's an interesting question. How does Abed handle Troy being with Britta? Like, obviously that would kind of bother him, but I just don't think this episode really does anything interesting with it, because all it does by the end is just re-solidify the status quo. That is that Abed and Troy are still best friends, Abed is still dating Britta, and everything is fine. The message of the episode seems to just be, don't overthink things, which is a fine message, I guess, but it's not very interesting for a Community episode. I do like the idea that Pierce goes into the focus groups for the American version of Dr. Spacetime or Inspector Spacetime or whatever it's called. I like the idea that he gets into the focus groups for that and like really just fucks it up. I think that's really funny.
You see? It's funny because it's clear.
Number 106. Economics of Marine Biology. I like the idea of this episode. I feel like I've said that a lot. It's just not very interesting. Like, that's a lot of the season 4 episodes, is that they just don't really know what to do with themselves. Like, it has a lot of interesting ideas. Let's do puppets. Let's go to an Inspector Spacetime convention. Let's have this like guy who's going to give the school a lot of money and we have to impress him. You know, it has these like fun sitcom ideas, but it doesn't know what to do with any of them. It doesn't have any concept of like what to do with that in relation to the characters. It just sort of does them and then gets them out of the way. The Dean is really fun in this episode, but I think that's kind of its only saving grace.
Jeff, do something. Oh.
Other than that, the conclusions feel unearned. Archie being like, I wish somebody would stand up to me. That's just not very interesting. And then the Pierce and Jeff plotline is literally resolved with Jeff just going back to the barber shop and Pierce easily forgiving him. Number 105. Heroic Origins. Again, Another kind of interesting idea from season 4 that just falls flat. It's so uninteresting. There's just nothing about it that's really all that fun or all that interesting. I just said interesting twice, but that's how little there is to actually say about this episode. I think it's a really cool concept. The idea that like all of these characters have been crisscrossing paths in their histories this entire time, but it's just not done with any kind of flair or leads to any very interesting character revelations. I guess Jeff defending the stripper that Shirley's husband cheated on her with is kind of interesting, but again, like with the last episode, it's sort of resolved very easily. Jeff just goes to the froyo place and Shirley also goes there and everything's fine because they all decided to go to Greendale at that froyo place. Like, they don't reckon with it the way that I feel like they're supposed to. Like with most season 4 episodes, it can just be summed up like this. It's an interesting idea that they obviously had no idea how to capitalize on. So it just becomes a boring mess with maybe a few good jokes. Number 104. Advanced documentary filmmaking. I don't like the Changnesia plotline. I think it's dumb. I think it's stupid. And like with most of the things in this season, it is dropped so unceremoniously. It comes to such an easy, simple conclusion that you wonder why it was even there in the first place. But this one, they spent literally an entire episode on. It says nothing interesting about the characters. It does nothing interesting with the characters. It does nothing interesting with their relationships. It's just boring nothing. It's a joke machine, and that's perfectly fine and enjoyable, but I want there to be a little bit more when I'm watching Community. I feel like most of these are just me complaining about season 4 as a whole, and yeah. Number 103. I hit the microphone. History 101. We're still not out of season 4 yet. This was the first season 4 episode, and to me, it is indicative of all of season 4's problems. The interesting thing about it is that the entire conception of the episode is that Abed is going into his happy places, which are just more and more generic sitcoms with more and more caricatures of these characters. But what it kind of reveals about itself by doing that is how much season 4 relies on the caricatures, but doesn't actually understand the complexities underneath those caricatures. The Community cast, especially the main cast, are built on very specific caricatures and tropes, but within those tropes, there are more complex people with more complex motivations. And then by making fun of those caricatures, it reveals that those caricatures are actually not very different from the versions of the characters we're seeing within the show's actual reality. The only thing that's missing is the laugh track. It understands Community's more meta angles, its zanier ideas, but it doesn't understand its characters, and that's where the strength of this show lies, is in its characters and their complexities and their relationships. And season 4 just doesn't know how to do anything with any of that. So it relies on the caricatures. It relies on the zaniness. It relies on that because it doesn't know how to do anything that isn't that. And so season 4 just becomes this nothing season, this joke machine of a season that's fun to watch at times, but ultimately has nothing more to offer than just a couple of chuckles. I feel like a broken record, but we're not done with season 4 yet. Number 102, Paranormal Parentage. My most major beef with this episode is that it spends like a third of its runtime on this idea that Troy and Britta want to take their relationship slow, which I have two problems with. Number 1, why would either of these characters want to take their relationship slow? Troy and Britta have both been shown to not be characters who are that ashamed of their sexuality or having sex with other people. Why would they want to take this particular relationship slow? Why would they be uncomfortable with that? Number 2, if you're going to do that, stick to it. Don't literally start the next episode with them in bed with each other. Why would you spend an entire episode just solidifying this idea that they want to take it slow and then have them be in bed together in the very next episode? That's literally my only real problem with this episode, other than my other general problems with season 4. But what the hell? And it just underlies one of my biggest problems with season 4 that we will talk about more in number 101, basic human anatomy. This actually isn't a very bad episode. It's the Troy and Britta breakup episode, and I think it's actually done surprisingly well. It was actually written by Jim Rash, which I think is a big reason why it kind of works, but within the context of the greater season, it's just kind of a slap in the face. Like, Troy and Britta's relationship should have been one of the most interesting, complex relationships of the series, but the season 4 showrunners didn't know what the fuck to do with it. So they just didn't do anything with it and then just broke them up. It's a decent breakup episode. I like the idea of why Troy breaks up with Britta. I think it's interesting that Troy just doesn't think he's ready for this kind of commitment and how Britta kind of respects that. I think the ending of the episode is one of my favorites, them embracing and recognizing they're still going to be very good friends because they do still care about each other, just not like that. I think that's great. But within the context of the season, within the context of this plot, it feels so totally unearned. I honestly would have had more respect for it if they just completely ignored the whole idea that they were going to be together in season 4. If they had just like made a joke about it and said, yeah, like that was a thing, but then we just stopped doing it, and now we're here in season 4. I would have still been kind of bummed about it, but I could have respected that at least. This just feels like an attempt to create emotional sincerity out of something they didn't know how to do anything with, and that's why it goes so low on the list. So now, I'm going to do a bit of a cop-out. Numbers 100 to 52 are the episodes I affectionately refer to as the episodes I don't remember by title alone. As such, they're the ones I don't really have anything interesting to say about. So instead of just subjecting you to 48 entries of, oh yeah, that one, I love that episode, I'm instead going to show you my favorite moment from each episode out of context. Enjoy.
You guys have never seen a naked woman?
You don't have to make us feel bad.
Well, she is. Is it a he or she?
He.
Well, he's really got his teeth in my flesh right now. Okay, he's touching bone. Just waiting for him to finish up. Not a lot I can do at this point.
I'm on the playground. Stop taunting me. I just want to go on the swings.
Good. Early childhood is a treasure trove of pain.
That happened this morning.
My name is Elroy Potashnik, and from 2006 to 2009, I was addicted to encouraging white people.
Hey, guys, thanks for eating all the macaroni.
Shut up, Leonard. Nobody even knows what you're talking about.
I did eat all the macaroni. It's messed up that he knows.
I am the least racist person in the world. My best friend, when I was 6 years old, was a black man.
I've peed alone my whole life.
I left my notebook in there.
Well, you're gonna have to come back later. I'm trying to prove a point.
How one-on was he? Tell me when to stop.
It was the other arm.
I don't understand you, Britta! I don't understand you at all!
Wait a second. Here, this.
Oh.
Whoa!
You may need it.
Oh, Pierce, you really don't know how this works, do you?
Are you always carrying that?
Not in the shower.
I'm sick and tired of making excuses for you two. You're an embarrassment to the department. You're off the case and off the force. Your badges, your windbreakers now. Now! I ain't got all day agitating my sciatica.
I can't wake up Pierce. Is this gonna take an unexpected turn?
You have to know how to do it. Discrimination lawsuit.
Preposterous.
Did you know you can make an ashtray using only a cigarette and a snitch's forehead?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what if I shared all the stuff you say? He thinks all dogs are boys and all cats are girls.
There's no way to disprove that. Have you ever seen a cat penis?
Are you saying that we're not allowed to protest? Britta, you sound like Guatemala.
Don't talk to Vaughn.
That is girl for talking to Vaughn.
Who's in and can you cover me? I'll pay you back. I'll get it from your parents. I'll pay you back. At which point I'll pay back your parents. Which will be never. I will get a high five from your parents. You're gonna burn down the school and kill everyone.
Fire can't go through doors, stupid. It's not a ghost.
I guess it was just air.
Might you ever consider spending the night with a third person?
That's not on there. Wow, it's on there.
We need to redo these.
We printed 5,000.
We'll print 5,000 more. I'm trying to save the planet here.
And for the record, I never thought you were cool. I only thought you were a lesbian.
Whose hands are these?
And then we just have to record fake exclusive commentary by Christian Bale. Go ahead, you first.
This scene was a special challenge to all involved.
Stop it! That's not a real option.
Girls? Girls.
I don't know who told you pouting was an option for you, but all you're making me feel right now is hatred of Renee Zellweger.
I hope you're as fertile as I am tonight.
More.
Oh.
We don't want you to tell anyone about this. And if you do, we don't want them believing you. Isn't that right, Black Hitler?
You're, gay, right? I mean, like, openly gay?
I'm not openly anything, and gay doesn't begin to cover it.
Would you stop?
Please. You get paid.
Do they do stuff to your butt?
No.
Do you get paid more if they do stuff to your butt?
No.
It's fine. I'll do it.
What about babies?
What about him?
How many?
Pick a number, dick, like it's up to me.
I'm not letting him hug me. I hug my father. He has gunpowder in his pants. I draw my sword. Stay back.
I draw an arrow. So do I.
Troll sow.
Dean.
Yeah.
We have a 597 currently going on in your office.
597? There's a dog fighting ring in my office?
Oh.
You know, I once loved it too. Matthew.
I'm Space Elder Britta. What are you guys talking about?
Matchbook. Something about it seemed cluey. Arizona Matchbook Company. Arizona. Arizona backwards is still Arizona.
Some of us won't make it, but there is a place where we will all see each other again. And that place is Denny's.
Which Denny's?
We'll figure it out later, Donner.
The one near the 15 exit. I'm banned from there.
Well, then I guess I'll see you in hell.
C'est ce car il ne veut pas apprendre Excel et je meurs car il ne veut pas apprendre Excel comme le marin qui fume cigarette sous le canal.
These two are clearly in love. If they want to express that love in a perfectly healthy way, then okay, hold on. Is this what I think it is? That? Odd, unhealthy, real quick.
You just need to look and see if the baby's head has reached the cervix.
No problem, Roblo.
We should really start learning people's names.
I agree with Brown Jamie Lee Curtis.
I'm sorry, do you mind if we have this conversation in a room with less balls? You're very confident, I'll say that.
I'm gonna deep fry your dog and eat your mama's face. And I'm gonna wear your little brother's skin like pajamas.
And now, with your permission, I'd like to sing a little song about race mixing. This one's called Don't You Do It.
Get out! Everybody here is a fart. A living fart from the butt of a lesser god.
Did you enjoy it? And here we are, the top 51 episodes of Community. These are the ones that I genuinely really, really like. The ones that I really love to talk about. So let's start with number 51, Introduction to Finality. Introduction to Finality was the season 3 finale, the first of the 4 finales that could have been the show's series finale. And honestly, while I'm glad this didn't end up being the series finale, I do still really like this episode. And if it did end here, I probably would have been okay with it. It does sort of feel like it was scrabbled together very fast, as though halfway through filming the season, they realized this might be their final season, so they had to very quickly figure out how to end the show. But this episode still really works for me because it focuses on the characters. I'm not a huge fan of the Troy plumbing arc. I don't think it's really all that interesting. I think it's kind of weird for Troy because it just feels like they kind of had this idea and they had this character they didn't know exactly what to do with. So let's just put them together. That being said, I think that's done really well here. I think this is the best way that this arc could have ended.
I made a new rule that the air conditioning repair school has to act like a regular school. I can do that because I'm their messiah.
And I really love the plot where Jeff is having to represent Shirley against his old partner at his old firm. That whole thing just makes sense for a finale, you know, bringing it all kind of full circle. The whole idea of Jeff used to be a lawyer, now he's a better person, and he's representing the smaller people. I do think that the Abed Dark timeline thing doesn't really have an especially satisfying conclusion. I mean, I like it, but at the same time, I just feel like Abed sees Jeff give a Jeff speech. And while that's very fitting for the show, I don't know. I kind of wish there was a little bit more to it. But again, if this did end up being the series finale, I would have been pretty okay with it. I would have been okay with this being the end of the show. I'm glad that it wasn't, but I would have been okay with it. Number 50, Her Story of Dance. Yeah, weren't expecting any season 4 episodes to creep into the top 50, were you? I love a good Britta episode. I think Britta has come closer and closer to being my favorite character in the show. I do think it's weird the way that the character devolved over the course of the seasons, but I always loved a good Britta focus episode. And as far as Britta focus episodes go, this one's actually pretty solid. I think that it comes to sort of this core of Britta's character, that she wants to be able to succeed. She wants people to like her. She wants people to want her. You know, she wants to feel like she is succeeding in some way or doing something good or substantial. I talked about it a little bit in my Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas video from a long time ago, but the entire idea of Britta's character to me is that she wants so badly to do good things, but she feels incapable of doing those good things. And I think what this episode gets right about the character is that desire, that very sincere want to do something good. Even if it is a little silly, but I think the silliness actually adds to it because ultimately, it's not about the social awareness of protesting a Sadie Hawkins dance. It's about her. It's about wanting to prove that she matters in some way and that she can succeed and make people happy. That moment at the end of the episode where Jeff sends her the text saying, "You Britted this," after she's succeeded, that's honestly one of my favorite little interactions between them. I think that's really wonderful and wholesome and sincere. And I almost forgot, Brie Larson's in this episode. I love the relationship between Abed and Rachel. I love the way that it's set up in this episode. It's done really well, and I really like it, and I wish Rachel was in the series more. Number 49, Basic Email Security. This episode is on the list for one scene, and you know exactly the scene that I'm talking about.
Oh, did anyone see Jeff's letters? He writes to astronauts.
Talk about creepy.
They're national heroes!
Yes, they are! Leave them alone!
The scene where everybody confronts everybody else about their emails is one of the funniest scenes in the show. It's deeply rooted in the characters and their personalities and their relationships, and it's so fucking funny. It is just such a funny scene, and I love how the episode itself just relishes in the irony of the situation and how it just completely fails to answer the question that it sets out to answer at the beginning, because ultimately it's a complicated question and Community recognizes that it cannot come up with the actual answer. Instead, what it chooses to do is recognize that what these things often are is just people who want to feel better about themselves by taking a stance of moral superiority. And you're taking such a stance and dying on a hill for a comedian that is not only offensive, but is deeply unfunny.
Okay, this guy. Look at him. It looks like he ate so much. He's very fat.
Don't do this to me.
It relishes in the complicated and chaotic nature of the entire thing, the chaotic nature of people, and how none of this makes any fucking sense. There are no clear answers. There is no clear message. It's just nonsense. Number 48, intermediate documentary filmmaking. This was the first documentary style episode, and I love it, love it, love it, love it. It's just a great showcase of every character and their relationships with one another and their quirks and their personalities and their flaws and their insecurities. It's one of those episodes that the characters don't really come to any emotional realizations. There's not any big moments. It's just Let's have a lot of fun playing with these characters and their complexities. And it uses the documentary filmmaking aspect of that to great effect. It actually does kind of feel like you're seeing these people just sort of in their everyday lives, almost as though the rest of it was kind of this edited down thing. And now we're seeing these characters actually in their reality. It's sort of an odd kind of meta angle, but it works really well, and it does a lot to really solidify who these characters are. Not to mention, it's just a great Pierce episode. This entire thing with him afraid that people aren't taking him seriously and afraid that people don't respect him, because that's his entire thing. That's all he wants, is for people to respect him and take him serious. But it's because of that desire that nobody does, because he's so desperate for people to take him seriously that nothing he ever does can be taken seriously.
You guys think I'm some kind of a joke? This isn't disproving the theory.
Number 47, Pascal's Triangle Revisited. I have a theory that season 1 of Community was made specifically for the subversion at the end of this episode. It wanted to spend the entirety of season 1 building up this relationship between Jeff and Britta and trying to make you think that this is like your Jim and Pam or your Leslie and Ben or whatever else. This perfect relationship that eventually everybody will see and they'll get together and it'll be perfect and it'll be happily ever after, until later on when Jeff wants to start like a sports company or something, or whatever the hell happened in The Office. And then there will be like a cameraman who hits on Britta, and that plotline won't really go anywhere. Anyway, the point is Community never did that. Community said, let's go ahead and play like we're going to do that. And then at the very end of the episode, the season 1 finale, there was no other Community after this until season 2 came out. Jeff and Annie are gonna kiss. And to me, that was when Community like became Community. That was when it dropped all pretense of being a normal show, because we're just going to take this relationship that we've been building this entire time, throw it out the window, and then have this relationship that we were kind of building in the background, but a little bit more subtly, except for Debate 109. We'll get to that episode later. And then have that happen at the end of this episode, playing like we're gonna do that relationship, and then we don't do that relationship. Okay, actually that one's a little bit more complicated, but again, we'll get to it. This episode is so high on the list because of that. The episode itself is great and I love it, but the reason that it's so high on the list is because it did that. It said, fuck your emotional investment, we're doing this instead. And like, I was invested in Jeff and Britta in season 1, and then the show knocks you over the head and says, you shouldn't be, that's not a good pairing. And this entire idea of the Jim and Pam and the Leslie and Ben is a nice fantasy, and I love those relationships in those shows, but ultimately it's not very realistic, and I think we all know that. As much as we would love to be Jim and Pam, at the end of the day, aren't we really all just Jeff and Britta? Number 46, Geography of Global Conflict. Not only do we get the introduction of Annie Kim in this episode,
and Asian Annie, Obama's America,
but we also get a really good Annie focus episode out of this. Annie is a character who wants to win. She wants to be the best at everything that she does because she needs to prove herself to other people. She has this constant necessity for validation, and that is what is on display in this episode. What Community kind of does really well is just take these absurd characters and makes them feel real, but still keeps a hold of those absurdities for comedic effect. And Annie's very severe nature, her competitive nature, is very much exaggerated for this episode, but it still feels very authentic, weirdly. A lot of that is the performances. Alison Brie is wonderful as Annie, obviously, but it's also in the writing. Community really is just authenticity in exaggeration. And I don't think there's many other episodes that showcase that better than this one. Number 45, Cooperative Escapism in Familial Relations. This is Community's only Thanksgiving episode, and it was in season 4, and it's the best episode in season 4. Because besides the B plot of the Shawshank Redemption thing and the jailbreak in Shirley's house, this is really just entirely a character-centric episode about Jeff and his dad. Jeff's appendicitis speech is maybe one of my favorite Jeff speeches in the entire series.
I got 17 cards, and I still keep them in a box underneath my bed 22 years later, because it proves that someone at some point cared about me.
The idea that all Jeff has ever really wanted is just for somebody to care about him, but he's grown up in these environments where nobody ever has. So he hurts himself and through association hurts others in order to just get people to care about him or pay attention to him at all, because his dad certainly never did. Not to mention just solidifying this sort of fan family archetype within the study group by them all coming together at the end for a Thanksgiving dinner. And that's just nice. I'm filming this on a different day. Number 44, aerodynamics of gender. This one's just like delightfully absurd. It's just something about there being like a secret trampoline on the premises and that being some magical thing. It does a lot of great stuff with the Pierce storyline in season 2 and his descent. It does a lot of great stuff between Jeff and Troy. The entire storyline of Abed becoming a mean girl is just really funny. I actually don't have that much to say about this one, to be honest. I just really like it.
It's going to be a maze.
Number 43, Messianic Myths and Ancient Peoples. There's not a lot of good Shirley and Abed episodes, so this one actually is a really nice change of pace. And the B plot with Pierce getting into trouble with other old people is just comedy gold. The way that it characterizes Pierce as just a rebellious teenager who's getting on his parents' last nerve, it's just, it really works for the characterization of Pierce in general, especially throughout season 2. And I like how it gives Pierce kind of this, at least some sense of morality. Like, he's the only person who stays behind in the car to make sure the person that was driving was okay. And the Shirley Abed plot is actually kind of similar, because it's Shirley throughout the entire episode trying to get this production shut down for selfish reasons, but then at the end she hears Abed's prayer, which is really this surprisingly quiet and like kind of emotional moment, and then seeing Shirley take a bat to everything and become the villain in order to make sure that Abed is okay. It's the arguably two most selfish characters in the group, Shirley and Pierce. They're all kind of selfish, but you know how it is. Getting to have these moments where they actually do get to do something for other people. And it's done in an episode with a lot of great jokes and bits, and just, it's a lot of fun. Number 42, Curriculum Unavailable. Community did a lot of like sort of sequel episodes, not so much as in they were sequels to episodes that had come previously, more as in they were revisiting an idea or a kind of episode that they had done before. Curriculum Unavailable was a new clip show episode where they reference things that actually never happened in the series' history. And while it's definitely a step down from Paradigms of Human Memory, which we will get to, this episode still has a lot of great moments, a lot of great jokes, a lot of great bits.
Greendale is purgatory, and I am the devil. What? I knew it.
Stop letting him make you realize stuff.
I think this episode is so high on the list purely because I think it shouldn't have been as good as it was. It kind of should have sucked in comparison to Paradigms of Human Memory, but it works surprisingly well. It's honestly my favorite episode in the entire Chang Dynasty arc. Number 41, Intro to Political Science. This episode's a little weird to watch now because the entire impetus of the plot is Vice President Joe Biden coming to school.
Whatever. I just had a dream that I was a regular president.
I just love this episode because it's like this surprisingly deep critique of the entire American political system and how it's ultimately just a popularity contest. It's about personality, it's about what you say, it's about how you say it. And then when they actually get into office, they kind of do nothing. Yeah, isn't this episode a little bit more relevant than I'd like it to be? Every character gets a moment to shine in this episode. Every character gets a nice little joke or a fun plot line, except for Shirley. Was Shirley even in this episode? Abed's weird relationship with the Secret Service agent was always really fun to me. Pierce's vendetta against Vicky and then saying his like deepest line with a pencil in his cheek.
When we seek to destroy others, we often hurt ourselves. Because it is the self that wants to be destroyed.
Pierce, you're not usually so poignant.
Well, Vicky finally lent me her pencil.
And then at its core, it's just a really solid Jeff and Annie story. Jeff and Annie stories in Community are always really fun because I feel like They are similar in all of the right ways and then different in all of the right ways. It creates these really interesting and fun dynamics in these episodes because, you know, for example, in this episode, you get Jeff, who is this cynic. He believes that the political process is all a sham, which it kind of is. And Annie is the determined idealist who wants to affect real change and do real things. But then at the end of it all, it just kind of ends up being that the politics don't really matter as much as the people around you and making sure that those relationships don't suffer because you're trying to make a point. Number 40 and number 39. Basic story and basic sandwich. These two are pretty interchangeable. This is the two-parter season 5 finale, and I think it's time for me to finally say, I fucking love season 5. Season 5 is like, for me, the reason that season 3 shouldn't have been the ending, because I love season 5 so much. Honestly, I think season 5 is at times better than Community at season 2 or season 3, which, you know, many people say is when it hit its peak. And this finale is one of the reasons why, because honestly, I would have been more okay with this being the finale than season 3's finale. The entire thing is just this really fun story about, like, facing an ending, and what are you going to do when everything you've known in your life starts to change, when people around you start going down roads that you don't want them to go down, and when the world around you just isn't functioning the way you think it's supposed to. I think the reason that I really love these two episodes mostly is Annie's arc through it all. I think besides Jeff, Annie is probably the character who changes the most throughout the entire series, slowly becoming this much more mature adult who has more mature outlooks on things. That miniature little Jeff speech she gives near the end of Basic Sandwich is probably one of my favorite moments in the entire series.
We have to respect each other enough to let each other want what we want, no matter how transparently self-destructive or empty our desires may be.
I think that would have been a great way to end the series. It's better to let people be who they are, flaws and all, than to try and force them to subscribe to your notion of what is good and what is right and what will make them happy. Is that not what Community was about all this time? Number 38, bondage and beta male sexuality. I think this is the only episode that could be classified as a Duncan focus episode, and that's why it's so high on the list. Duncan is just probably my favorite, like, side character that's not a part of the main cast. It would be the Dean, but he eventually did become a part of the main cast. It's one of the reasons I love season 5 so much is because they brought that character back and used him so effectively, especially in this episode, especially considering that Duncan is kind of a really shitty person throughout most of his appearances, and here he actually gets to show himself to be kind of a decent human being. I mean, you don't get points for not taking advantage of somebody in an emotionally vulnerable state, but it's still better than the alternative. And you're still a person, even when you're by yourself, is still one of, if not my favorite Community quote. And I love the Chang ghost plotline. I don't have anything to say about it. I love how season 5 kind of realized that Chang needed to not be a part of any big story. He didn't need to be a part of some big plot line like Changnesia or the first Chang dynasty. He just needed to be himself. And that was all he ever needed to be.
Those guys in there told me that you're the one that died in the fire, and you're a ghost!
And you just believed them? You just believed a bunch of ghosts?
Number 37, virtual systems analysis. Virtual systems analysis was at one point my favorite episode of the show. It has gone down in my estimation a little bit just because of how kind of obvious it is. But we never really got a lot of good Annie and Abed episodes. In fact, I'm not sure there are any other Annie and Abed episodes, specifically Annie and Abed. Usually if it's Annie and Abed, Troy's also there. but here it is just the two of them. And it's a way of exploring these two characters' deeper anxieties in a way that only Community could. You know, Abed being afraid that eventually everybody is just gonna put him in a locker, and Annie having to confront kind of her general desire for control. There's a lot of good moments in this episode, a lot of fun jokes. I'm a big fan of Troy and all of his very personal secrets.
And I'm more turned on by women in pajamas than lingerie. I just want to know they feel comfortable.
And just this whole thing with everybody is afraid of being alone. Everybody's afraid of not fitting in. And again, I think it does it in a little bit too obvious of a way that kind of dilutes the entire message. But I applaud it for its sincerity. Number 36, Repilot. Repilot had such a large task. It had to revive Community after the generally disappointing season 4. Repilot had to take season 4 and figure out how to go from there in a way that actually felt like Community again. And it succeeded with flying colors by doing what Community did best. It focuses on the characters, the people, the reasons they want to come back to Greendale, all the reasons that they want to shut down Greendale. The thing about Repilot is that it feels so much more like real than most other Community episodes do. Like, there's not a lot of crazy wild antics in this particular episode the way that there is in the rest of season 5. I think a lot of that is because the lighting is so dim for most of it, and I think Jeff is at his realest here that he's ever been. He's like very resentful, you know. He ended season 4 with this very ideal outlook. He wanted to help the little guy out, and now he's here at the beginning of season 5 and he's just completely failed in that pursuit. I've always really wanted to hear the rest of his monster speech.
You're an amateur monster, Alan, and you stomped in the grave of a real monster who was willing to stay buried. Because real monsters have shame, because they wish that... You're not worth the monologue. Give me your time.
I think the point that I'm ultimately trying to make is that season 4, as I've said previously, really was focused on the crazy antics of Community, the over-the-top meta stuff that really wasn't what Community was all about to begin with. It was about the people, and Repilot kind of reprioritized that. Number 35, Basic Rocket Science. Basic Rocket Science is just it's just so fun. It does this whole idea of the space drama, the people lost in space and everybody having to bring them back down, you know, the whole Apollo 13 thing. It just does it so effectively. The way that I've always viewed it is that Community is both parody and homage. It is making fun of these things, but at the same time it has such a respect for them, it has such a love for them, that it does them like surprisingly well. I can't watch Basic Rocket Science without cheering at the end because it's just so satisfying to watch. Honestly, I don't really have a lot more to say about it than that. It's just really fun to watch, and I get excited about it whenever it shows up on my rewatches. Number 34, The Psychology of Letting Go. Grief as a concept is really interesting to me thematically because it's this incredibly strong emotion that I think everybody has felt in some way, on some level, whether you've lost a person that you've loved, a pet that you've loved, or just anything really. Grief is not like a thing that is relegated to only one experience. Grief is just an experience of some kind of loss. And the way that Community handles grief is done in a very Community-like fashion. Pierce believes in this bonkers cult-like religion where his mother is like a vapor or something, and Jeff is obsessed with proving him wrong because he's sort of grieving his loss of his belief in his own immortality. And it's just kind of this great little message of like everybody kind of grieves in their own way, and we shouldn't be trying to figure out how to make other people grieve the way that we would. Number 33, Comparative Religion. I don't think there is a bad Community Christmas episode, except for Intro the Knots. God, that could have been so much better if it was Die Hard. But I love this episode because it takes the diversity of its cast and actually like utilizes it. Something I love about the diversity of Community's cast is that it's not just kind of there for show. There's not necessarily anything wrong when you just have a cast that are different races and religions and sexualities or whatever it is, and that has no bearing on the story. Like, that's fine. But what I love about the way Community does it is that these religions are a part of their identity. It's something that matters to them, and it creates this sort of naturally occurring conflict because there is a difference there. But they're not differences that can't be overcome. Sometimes we need to set aside our personal understandings of the world to help other people. And as Shirley would say, that's nice. Number 32, Beginner Pottery. I love this episode so much. This psychological thriller that's built on Jeff's belief that he should be the best at everything, and him having to come to realize that he literally cannot be the best at everything.
You're going to be great at a few things, but really crappy at many more. And that takes a lot of the pressure off.
It's just interesting because when it comes to the later episodes of season 1, that's when you start seeing Community kind of become what the rest of the show would be. You start seeing more wacky plot lines. You start seeing crazier ideas, more meta ideas. You start seeing more of these parodies and homages and whatnot. You start seeing characters going through things in ways that they wouldn't go through them in normal sitcoms. We also get the introduction of Rich here, which is a lot of fun. I love Rich as a character. And it's always just fun to see Jeff in an episode where he's just falling apart completely. Number 31, analysis of quirk-based networking. Throughout Community, I feel like there are just always these like little digs at like systemic processes, like Intro to Political Science that we've already talked about. The way that people have to go through all of these systems to do anything of value is just so silly when you think about it. But it's also critical of kind of the other side of the coin, where it's like people who just give up completely because it just takes too much and the system is so corrupt. We get a lot of Annie's idealism, which is such a core part of her character, and it's really nice to see that. And then we get Hickey, who I love Hickey so much. Hickey is like the best thing that season 5 had.
If you want to hang a bulletin board, you need to get a work order from the head janitor.
They get more powerful than you?
Hickey is the cynical guy who like has been through this system and knows that it's corrupt, know that it doesn't work, know that you just have to give up on your values in order to get anything of value done. And the way the episode ends is just kind of like, maybe we shouldn't allow all of these barriers to prevent us from doing something that's good. Number 30, Biology 101. I do have a bit of beef with this episode just because it's such an immediate turnaround from Pierce leaving the group at the end of season 2, but I think it's done pretty well here. Not only is it another Jeff loses his shit episode, which is always fun, and honestly the best thing that we got out of the air conditioner repair school stuff was John Goodman, and this is the first episode that he appeared in.
Well, now you're going to feel my power as it surges downward from me straight through you from nostril to rectum, now until the end of time. And that's what's up.
Biology 101 was a great start to season 3, and I think it was a really great sort of message to send that this show is not going to get any less weird anytime soon. Here's one people might get mad at me about. Number 29, Remedial Chaos Theory. Why is this not in the top 10? Why is this not even in the top 20? Well, it's because I don't love it as much as everyone else does. I think it's a really great episode. It wouldn't be this high on the list if it wasn't. But I've always viewed Remedial Chaos Theory as kind of being a great first Community episode for people to have. It's just a great showcase of every character, all their relationships with one another, while also having this really high concept plot line of all of these different realities depending on where the dice lands. There's definitely a very impressive element to this in how you have to, when writing it, figure out exactly all the different elements that can change and keep track of those elements depending on who is going to get the pizza and who isn't. It's just kind of impressive from a writing perspective, but I think that's also kind of where its flaws come from. It has to focus on that part of it so much that I think what's actually happening to the characters in the episode kind of suffers a little bit. Not to mention that because it has so many characters, all of the entire cast in this one location, in this one plot, those characters kind of get stretched thin. Like, the episode is so short for how much it has to do. And again, this episode is pretty high on the list for a reason. It's a great episode. I'm just trying to explain why I don't think it deserves to be higher on the list. It is infinitely rewatchable. It's so much fun. And again, I think it's a great way to introduce somebody to Community. Like, if you're on the fence about getting into Community, I think watching Remedial Chaos Theory is the thing that is going to get you to decide whether or not this is going to be the show for you. Number 28, Critical Film Studies.
I pooped my pants. I did.
We don't get enough great Jeff Abed episodes. In fact, there's really only 2 I can think of, and the other one is higher on the list. I think this episode is indicative of Community's strength for dialogue. I mean, the entire idea of basing it on a movie that is pretty much entirely dialogue means you have to have enough confidence in your own dialogue writing ability. And I love how it's rooted in this anxiety of Abed's, this anxiety that Jeff is avoiding him and doesn't want to be around him. The thing that I love about Abed's character, and I talked about this I think in my actual Community video, is the way that Abed's meta references and all of that stuff is actually a part of his character. The world just makes more sense to him when he views it through the lens of storytelling and film and TV and stuff. But at the same time, it's because this is inherently deceptive that it does ultimately come back to bite Abed in the ass. It's the catch-22 of Abed. This is the only way that he can really view the world and understand it the way that other people do. But it's also the thing that alienates him and creates that kind of separation. I think the other Jeff Abed episode does that as well, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Number 27, Physical Education. Physical Education is the episode I remember watching of Community and figuring out, oh, this is what people were talking about. It's the first one that just so fully commits to the bit of this is a big sports drama story, but it's pool, which is one of the most boring sports to watch, and yet it makes it compelling because it just goes so all out. It's so overdramatic. It's so over inspirational.
I choose shorts.
I choose shorts!
But again, it's rooted in the character. It's Jeff being insecure about how he looks and about how he's perceived by other people. He has to prove himself. He has to make sure that everybody knows that he is worth something. And then the entire B plot with Abed is just so much fun. And I love how it connects back to that A plot, that entire idea of if you really know who you are and what you like about yourself, changing for other people isn't that bad. That at the end of the day, it's not about how you interact with other people, it's more about how you interact with yourself. And that's actually surprisingly deep for what this episode is about.
Abed, you're a god.
Number 26, Advanced Safety Features. I didn't talk about it before because I forgot to talk about it before, but I love season 6 way more than I think other people do. Like, it goes up in my estimation each time that I watch it. I think season 6 is really great, and this is one of my favorite episodes from season 6. It's a Britta focus episode, which I love me a good Britta focus episode, like I've already said, but I almost feel like this episode serves as kind of a good conclusion to Britta's arc throughout the show, because it's this episode where Britta, this character who is so obsessed with helping other people and defining her worth by how much she is worth to other people, and then having that character choose to let somebody else go because she can't have what she wants with him, because she can't change who he is. That shot where Britta and Rick look back at each other for the last time is one of my favorite moments in Community. I love how this episode ultimately shows her choosing what she wants, even if she can't have it with the person that she wants. And ultimately her love for Rick was rooted in this idea of having somebody that did love her. It wasn't really about Rick as much as it was about the fact that Rick loved her. She didn't love Rick, she loved the idea of Rick. And choosing to let that go because having Rick would mean sacrificing herself and who she is and being authentic, I just really love that. Number 25, documentary filmmaking Redux. This is the only episode I can think of that can be defined as a Dean focus episode, and I don't know why we never got more. This episode is just so funny. Jeff like becoming the Dean mentally and like, you know, having this sort of method acting kind of mentality only to then get kicked off the set.
You're not. Oh, yes, I am. Well then, you're wrong for the part! Understudy!
Troy and Britta being traumatized by the Dean because he has to make them hug so many times.
I am trying to pull a 400-year-old dagger out of this nation's heart, and you two are hugging.
This episode is just so fun to watch, and it really shines a spotlight on why the Dean is such a fun and special character for this show. That, like the rest of them, he's racked with insecurity. He wants people to believe that he's a good Dean. Because at the end of the day, he cares about this school, he cares about these people, and he just wants them to like him. That's kind of sad, and it expresses that in not only the only way Community could, but in the only way that the Dean could.
What I'm about to show you is not the commercial you paid me to create. What I am about to show you is a glimpse into my mind and soul.
Number 24, Epidemiology. I pronounced it right that time. Probably my favorite Halloween episode. This is one of those episodes that doesn't really have a lot of like a deeper meaning or doesn't really do anything that big with the characters, but it's so committed to the bit. It's so committed to doing this idea as much as possible that it suddenly becomes super incredibly endearing. There's just not a lot about this episode that I don't enjoy on some level. I think it can really be summed up as just Community set the zombie apocalypse to ABBA. Number 23, Modern Warfare. I know that I said Physical Education was the first Community episode that felt like the rest of Community, but Modern Warfare is the one where it just became pure Community. Like Epidemiology and Basic Rocket Science, it's just the commitment that makes it so endearing. And while it's not ultimately my favorite paintball episode, this episode is still the episode that kind of made people realize what this show really was.
Oh my God, you've been hit.
What? Oh no. Wait. It's blood. I thought it was paint, but I'm just bleeding. Talk about luck.
Number 22, Regional Holiday Music. It's the Glee episode. What else do I have to say? The songs are surprisingly all bangers. It's a great sort of meta commentary on how Christmas is utilized for this almost kind of toxic positivity. The way that it's utilized in a way to sort of create this image where everything is fine when there's a reality underneath that isn't fine. Community always had this kind of weird relationship with Christmas where it wanted to sort of recognize the reality of it and the fact that ultimately Christmas has no meaning outside of what we give it, but also celebrate the warm feelings and nostalgia that comes along with the time. And I think Regional Holiday Music does that better than anything else, except for one episode, but we'll get to that. Number 21, Contemporary American Poultry. This was the other Jeff and Abed episode that I was talking about earlier.
Please don't do a special episode about me.
Oh, I wouldn't dream of it.
I think that the reason that the Jeff and Abed dynamic works and is so interesting is because Abed sort of looks up to Jeff in a weird sort of way. Jeff is literally his polar opposite in terms of the fact that Jeff can connect to people and manipulate people so easily, but Abed can't. Abed just kind of goes with the flow most of the time. He's not really capable of connecting with people on that level, but he really wants to be able to. He really wants to be able to connect with people, and this episode really showcases that by having something that other people want, chicken, he creates this reality where everybody needs him for something. But of course, those connections are inauthentic. He only has these connections with other people because he has something that they want. It's not because they like him or want to be around him. It's because he can give them something they don't have. And then it all comes back around to Jeff too, where it's like Jeff is very good at connecting with people. But of course, then he has to start questioning like whether or not his connections are authentic or real, because ultimately he is manipulating people. He's manipulating people into doing what he wants them to do. And so what makes this episode so special is that we have this character who desperately wants to be able to connect with people, but isn't sure that he can do that in an authentic way, with a character who is very good at connecting with people, but also isn't sure that he's doing it in an authentic way. It's this desire for authenticity, this desire for realness, this desire for having these connections with people and those connections being real and meaning something. And the anxiety that that is almost impossible because of who you are as a person. And then through that, this connection is made, this connection between Jeff and Abed, and it gets to be entirely authentic. Pretty smart when you think about it. Anyway, we're about to hit the top 20, and I'm going to record this on a different day. If I did my editing right, that looked really cool. And here we are at the top 20. These episodes are the cream of the crop for me. They are the best of the best. These are the episodes I get the most excited to rewatch. These are the episodes that I would recommend people to watch if they were looking to figure out if Community was for them, aside from Remedial Chaos Theory. And number 20 actually fits that pretty well. Pilot. The first episode of the series, the episode that started it all. And honestly, I love Community's pilot more and more each time that I rewatch the series. From the very beginning of the episode, you have Dean Pelton giving this speech about all the different types of people that go to Greendale, and then you have these shots of all the different characters, the main cast members, over all those different people, and that way, immediately, in the first minute of the entire series, you have an idea of who these characters are, why they're there, and what their deal is. And then it just spends the rest of the episode just letting you get to know them. It's mostly Abed, Britta, and Jeff, but you get to know everybody, and everybody kind of gets to show off their rapport with one another, their chemistry, and the writing and the dialogue is so strong and so funny. It's just really enjoyable to watch.
Say you have to pee, I need to talk to you. Say you have to pee.
That is weird.
Say you have to pee, I need to talk to you.
Do you have to pee?
No.
It's so easy to just slide into it, and it feels like you've been watching this show for years. There's a particular moment that I actually really love. It's that moment when everybody is fighting and Abed slams the table and goes into the Breakfast Club monologue. I love that moment a lot because it's like this perfect encapsulation of Abed's character. Things are getting heated, people are getting mad, he doesn't really know what to do with all of these emotions around him, so he just slips into a character, he slips into a movie. It perfectly establishes why Abed is the way that he is. He understands the world through film and television. It makes more sense to him than these very messy emotions on display. The emotions in film and television make a lot more sense. His obsession with these things is a reaction to the world around him. It's not just something that he enjoys. It's not just something that he's really into. It is his main way of understanding the world. And basically that's just what I love about this pilot. It's just these characters doing their thing, being who they are. And if you like that, you're going to love the rest of the show. And if you don't like that, nothing about the rest of the show is going to interest you. Okay, now that we're getting into the teens, I don't really know how to do the numbers on my hands effectively. Number 19, Debate 109. If there was any episode in season 1 that really telegraphed the season 1 finale twist with Jeff and Annie, it was this one. The episode really plays on the very competitive nature of both characters, because Jeff and Annie are both very prideful. They really want to win. They really want to prove themselves to other people. They're both really concerned with how much success they are able to achieve in their lives. They are also both rather attractive individuals. So you put the competitiveness and the attractiveness together, and you get Debate 109.
What is... Oh, you forgot your phone.
Oh, I can get another one.
The episode just really plays with the fact that these two characters do just work really well together. They challenge each other in all the right ways. Annie challenges Jeff to be a little bit more humble and actually prepare for things rather than just assume that you're going to be the best at whatever you do. And Jeff challenges Annie to be a little bit more impulsive, a bit more improvisational. They work really well together because they sort of balance each other out. And it's because of their competitive nature that they're forced into this situation where they have to balance each other out. Of course, this takes on a little bit more of a complicated role later on in the series as we start talking about things like codependence and, relying on one another to actually, be a full person. But here I think it works because they're just sort of learning from one another. And there is just sort of this weird sexual tension that neither of them really know what to do with.
Just pat me.
Again, this relationship gets more complicated as it goes along. But this episode is kind of the beginnings of it, and ending it by cheering on the idea that man is inherently evil. How can you not love it? Number 18, Intro to Recycled Cinema. I think this episode just really embodies why I love season 6, because it's this great sort of story on its own, this great story that starts as Abed giving up his own creative freedom to, you know, do this thing that all of his friends are pressuring him to do, and then that slowly morphing into Jeff becoming personally attached to the project itself and realizing that it's kind of all that he has left. But then there's sort of this meta angle to it, you know, as is Community's way. And it becomes this story about people changing their art and doing things to impress other people or do what other people want them to do, and how art is ultimately the product of an artist or a group of artists. That there are people behind these works and these projects. There are people with anxieties and imperfections and insecurities. These people have identities, and those identities are going to inform the art that they create. Art is personal, whether you like it or not. Even when something is made specifically for a paycheck, even when something is made without any soul, any actual personal reason for doing it, that art is inherently going to sort of take from the people creating it. It is going to be a reflection of the people that are making it. It's just kind of this wonderful episode about how no matter how stupid or silly a piece of art might seem, it matters to someone. It means something to someone. And if it means something to someone, then that means that it means something. It's impossible to create art without that art meaning something, because we're incapable of creating art that means nothing. And then using that narrative to add on to this narrative of Jeff and his fear that everybody is going to leave him behind and that his glory days are behind him and now this is just kind of his life, which is, you know, the overarching story for Jeff in season 6. I think that's really incredible how it's done. Number 17, Cooperative Polygraphy. Sometimes you put an episode so high because you just think it's fucking funny.
Clearly, Pierce is trying to lure us into a labyrinth of emotional manipulation and strategic instigation. And I think we're all smart enough to know we should quit while we're not ahead.
Yeah, I do believe yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Right.
They're all lying.
We all know that, you judgmental bitch.
This is one of those episodes that just never fails to make me laugh. It is absurd in all the right ways. It's sincere and heartfelt in all the right ways. I know this is really high on the list for me not to have a lot to say about it, but it really is just kind of that simple. It's just a great ensemble bottle episode where we get to see these characters playing off of one another in really entertaining ways.
Britta's the one that invited Garrett to Annie's birthday party.
Troy won't sit on a toilet seat after Jeff.
When we're alone, Shirley refers to you guys as those people.
Oh, when Annie's with other females too, she calls Jeff her uncle.
Charlie thinks we're all going to hell.
You are all going to hell. It's fine.
I don't know. I just love this episode.
Here's your sperm.
Number 16, Modern Espionage. This episode is so underrated. As paintball episodes go, I think it's one of the most committed to its themes. I think it works really well with the general season 6 thematics of letting things go and letting the past go. The Dean is great as always, and Jeff delivers a line in this episode that I think is the perfect encapsulation of what Community is all about.
We self-destruct like this because we'd rather be heroes and villains than just kind of sucky people that need to work a lot at getting less sucky.
It's a lot of fun, has a lot of great moments, and I think we should talk about it more when it comes to Community paintball episodes. Number 15, Basic Crisis Room Decorum. There are so many good bits in this episode. Britta being drunk the entire time. The Dean having a texting relationship with a Japanese teenager. You know, it makes more sense in... Okay, it doesn't actually make more sense in context.
It's only my style to be secret. Please bring me 5 cans of olives.
5?
5 cans?
Making an attack ad on a dog. Chang making a porn at City College. This episode just brings everybody together in such funny situations with such funny ideas. It's just such a blast to watch this episode. And on top of that, I think it's the episode that sort of proved why Frankie and Annie are not really the same characters, and it's mostly a matter of severity. Because while yes, they're very intellectual, very analytical, Annie is a lot more idealist, while Frankie is more of a realist.
Oh, God, no, I never hope. Hope is pouting in advance. Hope is Faith's richer, bitchier sister. Hope is the deformed, addict-bound, incest monster offspring of entitlement and fear.
While Frankie is more concerned with the technical fact that, yes, they didn't give a degree to a dog, Annie is more concerned with the fact that they very almost did. And I love how it ends on this idea that we need to embrace the fact that, yes, we do really stupid stuff sometimes. And the fact that we didn't do the ultimate stupid thing is not grounds to just ignore the rest of the stupid stuff that we did. We do need to constantly be getting better. Even if those ideals are impossible, we should be shooting for those ideals and living with the hope that maybe we can meet them. Because it's ultimately better to accept that you're not perfect and keep trying to get better than just try to avoid being perceived as the kind of school that would give a degree to a dog. Greendale needs to get its shit together, and it's trying. And that has to be enough. Number 14, Origins of Vampire Mythology. I feel like Britta is the one we see the least of in the actual A plot, but it really is her episode. It's about her kind of psychology. Why does she go for these men who hate her? And it's because she hates herself. Ultimately, it's because they confirm to her what she already thinks about herself. She already thinks that she's garbage. She already thinks that she doesn't deserve actual meaningful love. So she dates people that tell her that or act like that's the truth. And having this episode where Britta is acting almost like an addict for this emotional treatment because this is just how she perceives herself. And this is the best she can get to feeling some kind of control. She's so trapped in her own understandings of herself, her own understandings of what she deserves, that she can't see all these people around her that are actually genuinely trying to help her and genuinely loving her the way that she does deserve, because she's a human being and she deserves love. And that ending where she reads the text from Troy, who told her presumably something really sweet and nice and endearing, and her not only realizing that it was Troy that sent that, but then her smiling about it and allowing herself to feel good about it. It's such a nice little moment. And I really wish season 4 had actually done something with that relationship that was substantial and interesting.
We can't keep going to each other until we learn to go to ourselves. Stop making our hatred of ourselves someone else's job and just stop hating ourselves.
Number 13, Basic Lupine Urology. This is the Law & Order episode. Do I need to say anything more? It's the commitment to this one, I think, just the camera work and the cinematography and even down to the performances is just, it is Law & Order. It's an episode of Law & Order. It's just funny instead of serious. There's not a lot really done with the characters in this episode, but it's so high on the list just because, for one thing, it's fucking hilarious.
Uniform. Oh, jeez.
But also, it's just the commitment to it that I love. It's the fact that this was definitely made by people who watch a lot of Law & Order and know how it functions, know how it works, know what the structure is. I hit the microphone again. It's hard not to. I'm very close to it. There is at least some kind of character thing with Jeff, you know, and the whole man's gotta have a code idea. But I think the episode succeeds simply because it is such a one-to-one. This is a Law & Order episode, but with community characters and community sense of humor. Number 12, Pillows and Blankets. Like with Basic Lupine Urology, most of the reason I love this episode is honestly just because of the commitment to it. This is straight up a Ken Burns style Civil War documentary, but with this ridiculous situation of a pillow fort versus a blanket fort. But what gives it the edge over Basic Lupine Urology is the fact that it is sort of rooted in this very sincere conflict between Troy and Abed. The idea that these two characters are very good friends, they do really care about each other, but they're not always going to see eye to eye. And sometimes that is going to lead to bigger fights than they may want to actually have. It's just that instead of being a big blowout argument, it's literally a war. And there is part of me that wants to criticize the fact that it does kind of come to a very easy resolution, but I think the resolution really works because at the end of the day, it's this idea that, like, yes, friends do fight. Best friends do fight. People that you care about, you're going to fight with them. You're going to argue, you're going to disagree, and sometimes it's going to take much bigger form than you want it to. But ultimately, those fights are not necessarily in spite of the fact that you love each other. They're almost because you love each other. It's because you love and care about each other so much that these emotions are so heightened. It's because of that these things get so out of hand. And it's that narrative that I think really works within Pillows and Blankets. Number 11, conspiracy theories and interior design. This episode is a roller coaster of emotions. It's another Jeff and Annie centric episode, and I love Jeff and Annie centric episodes if you couldn't tell. And it's just so wonderful how many left turns that this episode takes, how convoluted the plot becomes on purpose because the point is that it's supposed to be absolutely ridiculous. But it's in that ridiculousness that it becomes extremely entertaining.
To keep up the lie, I had to create a fake teacher who needed other fake classes that needed to be filled with other fake students, and so on, and so on, and so on, etc.
Did you just mispronounce etc.?
And I think what really works about these episodes that are more just kind of joke machines as opposed to the joke machine episodes of season 4 is that there is an authenticity to these ones. There's a deeper understanding to these characters and to why they act the way they do and the underlying subtext that exists within these crazy scenarios. The reason this episode works so well is because of the subtext of Jeff and Annie, the fact that Annie does actually have legitimate feelings for Jeff, and Jeff hasn't figured out what his feelings for Annie are yet, but there's something there. It doesn't necessarily need to make the episode about that. It just needs to sort of be there within these ridiculous scenarios. I think conspiracy theories and interior design is the best example of that.
Oh, sure. Oh, I'll just blow it off. I'll just blow everything off. Heck, I guess I'll just blow off walking.
Okay.
Or now I'll just blow off standing. I'm just blowing everything off. Maybe I'll blow off talking language.
Okay.
Blee, blue, blah, 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 blee, blue, blah, blah.
And now, finally, we're in the top 10. The best of the best, the absolute cream of the crop. This is how I described the top 20, but I mean it this time. Number 10, A Fistful of Paintballs. This is my favorite paintball episode. For one thing, I love the Western aesthetic. I just love Western aesthetics anyway. It's kind of my jam. And then having this wonderful underlying narrative with Annie and Pierce, this idea that Annie, being kind of an idealist, really believed in Pierce when nobody else did, and then being proven wrong about that. And then that genuine anger that Annie has towards the person that she was the only one to stand up for. The duel between them, out of context, I feel like would be seen as more comedic, but within the context, it's this perfect representation of what Community does. It takes these ridiculous scenarios, these meta parodies and homages and whatever, and utilizes them to capture this emotional drama, to make these feelings and these emotions manifest. You could just have Annie and Pierce have like a really heated argument, but why would you do that when you could make it a literal Western duel? Number 9, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not going to talk about the thing with this episode. You know the thing that I'm talking about, because ultimately I am not the person to talk about it. I am not the person whose opinions matter on that front. So I'm just not going to talk about it. But I am going to talk about how I think this episode is one of the best episodes in the entire series. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but this episode makes me wish that I did. This episode is just so much fun, and the way that it fits into Pierce's season 2 villain arc, the way that it deals with these themes of escapism and depression and mental illness. Sometimes depression is just a sad old man who's desperately trying to be validated by the people around him. Not to mention that out of every Community episode, this is the one where I think I laughed the most consistently and the hardest. There's really nothing quite like the montage where Annie seduces the elf maiden. Number 8, Paradigms of Human Memory. Leave it to Community to do a clip show episode with clips from episodes that never happened. It's just such an ingenious idea. Flashing back to episodes and events that we've never seen, the idea that there was a St. Patrick's Day adventure, There was something to do with jump rope. There was something to do with a haunted house and an old western town. It's a great showcase of all the different characters and their personalities and their relationships. Really, the episode is just a great excuse to have as much fun with these characters and their dynamics as possible. I'm not really sure what to make of the whole we're gonna make a super group thing at the end and how that resolves everything. The only thing I can think of for it is that it has something to do with the idea that these people want so badly for this to work that they will make up the silliest idea possible to make sure that they stay together, kind of like cooperative calligraphy, which we'll talk about later. But even that messy resolution can't ruin how fun this episode is to watch for me. Number 7, mixology certification. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't love Troy, at least not as much as other characters. Like, if I was ranking the entire original main cast by my favorites, I think Troy would maybe go at like number 5. Out of everybody, he was always just the least interesting to me in terms of his actual character. He's still well written, he adds a great dynamic to the group, and Donald Glover, of course, plays him wonderfully. I just never really loved Troy as much as everybody else does. But I love mixology certification. Mixology certification honestly was the episode that sort of gave Troy more of a depth than I think he had before, because mixology certification sort of shows Troy to be, out of everybody, kind of the most put together person. Like, he's the guy who actually kind of has his shit together out of everybody, at least emotionally. He's the most selfless out of everybody. He's the person that's going to completely forgo his first drink on his 21st birthday because he has to drive everybody else home. Out of everybody, he is the most genuinely nice and good person in the group. That's what mixology certification kind of is. It's this episode where we get to see everybody's insecurities on display, where we get to see everybody's faults, and then we see Troy. And Troy is somebody who doesn't really believe in his own ability to do things. He doesn't really believe in his own understanding of the world.
Troy, we're 1990. We're horses.
I was born in 89.
Then you were born 21 years ago.
Which would make me 20, because everyone is 10 for 2 years. Because 5th grade is really hard for everyone. Mom, how many lies have I been living?
So he looks at the people like Jeff and like Britta, who are adults and seem to have things figured out. But then at the end, it turns out they were arguing over the same bar the entire night. And he realizes maybe no one knows what this whole adult thing actually is. And maybe instead I should stay true to myself. This episode is so decidedly normal. It's just the characters go to a bar. But the character work is so interesting, and the way that it takes Troy, who for me was not really that interesting of a character, and makes him surprisingly kind of the most mature and, again, genuinely nice person in the group. It's just a wonderful episode. It's one that I love to watch whenever I'm rewatching the series. Number 6, Introduction to Film. Introduction to Film is the 3rd episode of the series, and I know that because it was the episode that made me really fall in love with Community. I loved the pilot. I loved the second episode. I don't remember what the second episode was called, but this episode was the first that made me go, holy shit, this show is awesome. And it all has to do with the resolution of the episode, having Abed sit everybody down and watch his movie, and how his movie resonates with his father, how it manages to communicate to him how Abed is feeling, how it feels to Abed like his father blamed him for his mother leaving. That moment always hits me really hard because, you know, like, I kind of relate to Abed a little bit. The idea of stories being something that make the world make a little bit more sense, and the idea of communicating through your own sort of creation of art and narrative is something I relate to a lot. So that moment always really hits me really hard because it makes me feel kind of seen, I guess. The episode itself is great and I love it, but it really is that one moment that puts it so high on the list. It was the moment that I got to see Community's heart. Number 5, Basic Intergluteal Numismatics. I remember watching through season 4 and just knowing something was off about it. I didn't really know the whole like thing with season 4 when I first watched it, but it did definitely feel very off to me. But then going into season 5 and seeing Repilot and Introduction to Teaching, those episodes really felt like Community again. You know, it felt like it was getting sort of its groove back. And then we get to this episode, Basic Intergluteal Numismatics, and it was just such a breath of fresh air. It had been so long since I'd seen Community do something like this, since I had seen Community do something as objectively ridiculous as the ass crack bandit and utilize it to actually develop character and develop the relationships between those characters. And then so perfectly mimicking the style of David Fincher and the idea of the detective thriller, and then using that to develop the relationship between Jeff and Annie.
I'd be like the 50th person at this school to ask, what is this, huh? What is this creepy business?
What?
Using it to challenge these characters and question their relationship and question why they always seem to work together on these things and why they work so well together on these things. Watching this episode in the context of it being one of the first episodes after season 4 was just one of the most joyful experiences that I've ever had with television. And for that, it goes at number 5.
Although sometimes I wonder, are they chasing me as an excuse to get near each other? I mean, get a room already.
We're friends.
Number 4, Cooperative Calligraphy. This is the episode where they lose the pen. Much like with Paradigms of Human Memory, Cooperative Calligraphy does this whole idea of taking, you know, a TV staple, the idea of the bottle episode, and doing something really interesting and funny with it. Not treating it like a limitation, but actually utilizing it to do something new. Let's put all these characters' anxieties on display and let's see what happens. I think that's kind of what I love so much about a lot of Community episodes, is the willingness to just follow the characters wherever those characters might go or end up. The story and the plot don't matter nearly as much as how the characters interact with it and react to it. And this episode works because it is just purely that. Annie's pen has gone missing. She presumes that somebody has taken it and has taken many more before. Now, nobody gets to leave until the pen is found. What happens? It feels like one of those writing prompts where it's like, okay, this character finds a wallet on the sidewalk, completely abandoned. What do they do with it? Do they just take it? Do they try to contact the person? Do they take the money out and then contact the person? Do they just leave it there and not do anything with it? You can tell a lot about a character from how they react to that situation. And this episode is just kind of that. It's just a pen instead of a wallet. When you put these characters in this situation, how do they react? How do they interact with each other? What kind of decisions do they make? And what can we glean from those decisions? And having it resolve with this idea of the group just saying that a ghost took the pen, because it makes more sense than the idea that a person in the group doesn't belong in the group. And it's really ridiculous and over the top and silly, but it puts the focus where Community's focus has always been and should always be, on the characters. What are they doing and why? And that's Cooperative Calligraphy.
What the hell did you people do in there?
Something you and your puppies could only dream of, you non-miraculous son of a bitch.
Number 3, geothermal escapism. I talked about geothermal escapism in my main Community video, but again, I do not encourage you to watch that video because I don't think it's very good. Much like with A Fistful of Paintballs, I think geothermal escapism is a great example of taking the characters' feelings and emotions and making them manifest within the actual plot. But this one does it very literally, because it's Abed literally believing the floor is lava because that's how he feels. That is the chaos in his brain because he can't handle the idea that his best friend is leaving. What makes this episode work so well on an emotional level is just its sincerity. Not only is it the commitment to this post-apocalyptic theme, but it's the idea that this post-apocalyptic theme exists because for Abed, this is post-apocalyptic. Troy leaving is the apocalypse. And instead of facing that actual apocalypse, he would rather face this sort of constructed apocalypse in his head. This apocalypse based on tropes and things that make more sense than the feelings that he's feeling right now. And it approaches it with an undeniable sincerity. It takes it 100% seriously. Yes, there is like a level of humor to it. There's an acknowledgement that this is ridiculous.
Lucky boys! Earn your M&M!
But more than that is the acknowledgement that this is 100% serious to Abed. And then, of course, it's just a great Troy goodbye episode. It's the goodbye episode that Troy deserved. As Come Sail Away by Styx is playing and Troy is going away on the boat and Abed is watching him, it just makes me cry every time. There's something so genuine about it because, you know, these people were all friends with each other, like on the set. And so they're not just saying goodbye to this character, they're saying goodbye kind of to their actual friend. They're saying goodbye to Donald Glover. It's just really wonderful, and it gets the number 3 spot for that. Number 2, Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas. I did literally an entire video about Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas, just about the one episode, because I love it so much. It is my favorite Christmas special of all time. It's definitely my favorite Christmas episode in Community. There's not really anything about it that I don't like. I love how it really tries to sort of reckon with the idealism of Christmas, but also the reality of the actual holiday, and the idea that something doesn't have to have an objective, definite meaning to mean something. The idea that if something means something to you, then that meaning is valid, it's real. Nobody else has to agree with you. It just needs to mean that for you.
The meaning of Christmas is the idea that Christmas has meaning, and it can mean whatever we want. For me, it used to mean being with my mom. Now it means being with you guys.
I can't really say anything about Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas that I haven't already said, but it's a really incredible episode. But it's not number 1. Number 1, Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television. Every time that I rewatch Community, the series finale only goes up in my estimation. It is such a wonderful series finale, and I think the reason that it's a wonderful series finale, okay, there's a lot of reasons why it's a wonderful series finale. It's a wonderful series finale because, for one thing, it feels the most like it was supposed to be the series finale. Like, they didn't want to do season 7, you know? Maybe they wanted to do the movie. Man, I really hope they do the movie. But they didn't want to do season 7. They wanted this to be the end of the show, at least. Every other season finale from season 3 onwards that could have been the show's series finale felt like it was more of a, well, if we have to do the series finale now, then we can do the series finale now. But this one really felt like, no, this is it. This is the ending. I mean, probably the biggest reason for that is because they intentionally get rid of 3 of the main cast members in this episode, including Abed. And you cannot have Community without Abed in it. Another reason I think this works the best as the series finale is because, like I've been saying throughout this entire thing, Community was never about the crazy antics. It was never about the weird meta shit. It was about the characters. And this episode is about the characters. It's the only series finale that doesn't have like these huge stakes, this big plot where like big things could happen if the characters lose, like Greendale closing or something. Yes, the idea of everybody giving their hypothetical season 7 is very Community, but when you strip down the episode to its bare parts, it's just the characters talking at a bar. That's the entire thing. It's very quiet, you know? There's not a lot of big stuff happening. It's just this episode where everybody's kind of deciding where they're gonna go next with their lives. And some people are gonna go and do big things like Abed and Annie, and some people are going to stay behind and just keep doing what they've been doing, like Britta and Jeff. And it's Jeff's story that I think really works here, because this episode is really about Jeff. And you could argue that all of Community is really about Jeff at the end of the day. But this episode is really about him coming to terms with the fact that this chapter of his life is ending and a lot of things are changing around him, and he's not really gonna get to be who he used to be again. I mean, this entire series started with him trying to get his bachelor's degree because he wanted to go back to being a lawyer. But here he is at the end of season 6, and he's got his bachelor's degree, but he's a teacher and a functional alcoholic, and everybody else around him, all his younger friends, are going off to start their lives and do all this new stuff, and he's just getting left behind. And this entire episode is kind of about just accepting that things end, and it's okay for things to end. Just because something ends doesn't mean it didn't matter, and just because something ends doesn't mean that you wasted your time. Everything ends. Nothing lasts. But that doesn't mean that nothing matters. If anything, it means that everything matters. Because if it's going to end, then you need to appreciate it while it's here. And I think that's why the Jeff and Annie plotline of this episode works too, because it really sort of understands that by the end of the series, Jeff and Annie's relationship was this sort of weird kind of attachment where Jeff sort of saw Annie as his attempt at regaining a sense of youth, and he wasn't really willing to understand that she was her own person with her own desires and her own aspirations in her life. And he has to be willing to let her go, therefore letting go of his youth, letting go of the life that he used to live, and allowing himself to accept the future as it comes to him. I mean, just leave it to Community to make a series finale that is all about the idea of endings and the idea that things end even if you don't want them to end, and that sometimes they need to end. And that final kiss between Jeff and Annie is kind of symbolic of that almost. It's this idea of him kissing her goodbye and therefore acknowledging this fear, acknowledging this anxiety, acknowledging its reality, but still being willing to let it go. It's quiet, it's thoughtful, it's still really funny. It's my favorite episode of Community. And that's that. Making this video made me want to go back and rewatch Community. So I'm probably going to do that, honestly. This is still one of my favorite shows ever made, even when I was complaining about it, like all that time that I was complaining about season 4 at the beginning of the video. I still watch season 4. I still rewatch it when I rewatch the entire series. I don't skip it because it's just more of these characters that I love, even if it's not exactly in the forms that I love. Rewatching Community is like reuniting with your best friends. It's the reason that it really is my comfort show. It's the show that I watch when it feels like things around me aren't going as well as I'd like them to, because this show makes me feel a kind of joy that few other shows do. So anyway, thanks for watching. I now have to edit together over 4 hours of footage, and I hope you enjoyed this new thing, this new idea that I'm pursuing. Maybe this will work out, maybe it won't. We're just gonna have to see what happens. In any case, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. That wasn't a very good snap. Fuck.